Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Conquering Geek Culture. And today I'm joined by Nicole Pike. Hi, Nicole.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You called me out on LinkedIn, righteously so.
I think you asked for the feedback, right?
I did. I was putting together, so I asked our designer to put together 10 episodes. Let's put together all the people we had on the show. And when I saw the picture, I'm like, that's gonna be a problem because it's all more or less white middle-aged man.
Yeah.
And then I asked for feedback, and I was actually waiting for people to call me out. You did. I honestly appreciate this, and we had some interactions. I'm not sure if we had so many, but I hope that you know that I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, gosh, it was, and I preface my comment at the very beginning of it by saying, like, you had great people. I mean, each one of the people that you spoke to had a real reason to be on the show, right? So it's not like the content suffered, but yeah, obviously it's a hot topic in gaming in general, kind of diversity and representation. So always try to put a good word in for the females.
No, it's awesome, and thanks for being here. And I mean,
of course, I'm excited.
You've been working with gaming which sounds like almost like forever. So you did 13 years at Nielsen.
Yeah, exactly.
And now you're at YouGov. So do you want to walk me through what you did at Nielsen and kind of how your career went down?
Yeah, let's do it. So I started on like the CPG brand side of Nielsen and did that for a few years. And then we were looking at ways of taking a lot of like the predictive forecasting work that we did in CPG and moving it over to entertainment. And gaming kind of popped up as this opportunity. It was kind of a cool time in the industry. It was like 2006, 2007. So the Wii had come out, and all of a sudden people are like, whoa, like someone other than teenagers in their parents' basement actually want to play video games. We have no idea what kind of content to give them. We don't know what they like. We don't know why they bought this thing in the first place. And it kind of was it turned the industry on its head a little bit and trying to figure out, all right, like how do we become bigger and broader? And obviously, it's paid huge dividends today with how ubiquitous gaming is. But it was a really good time for research, right? Because all of a sudden you had this whole new group of consumers that needed a voice and wanted content in the marketplace. So we were able to, from that, build like a gaming specific business at Nielsen. So I helped to start and grow that over 10 years. Worked with, everyone from hardware manufacturers, software publishers, mobile gaming companies, which also just came out of nowhere during that time, right? So it was a really fun kind of dynamic time to start being in the gaming business. And then, a few years ago, esports, started to pop up more and more in conversations we were having with clients and then with our sports team as well from more of the sponsorship angle. So we took a look at it and said, you know what, there's an opportunity, like the industry is here to stay, it's real, it's growing, and it needs data. It needs, transparent, third-party, impartial data to help just, fund its growth and success. So started that business and did that for a few years. And then, now I guess in June, so literally right in the middle of the pandemic, or the height of the pandemic, I guess we're still in the middle of it, unfortunately, but moved over to YouGov. And, the way I look at that is YouGov sees gaming as a huge priority in terms of, being able to provide data and analytics to marketers, brands, companies in the gaming space. And for me personally, I've seen how much data, even just in the few years, I started the business at Nielsen on the esports side, how much data did help to like expand things. So for me, it's if we can create new sources, additional sources that are incremental to what's already out there, that's just going to help the industry. So it's kind of become my personal mission. And I'm lucky to have been able to find multiple places to continue doing that.
And you're a global sector head for esports and gaming at YouGov right now. So
exactly.
What do you do? Like, what kind of data do you provide? Like, why do you do this? And, what's your mission there right now, really?
Yeah. So the first thing, when YouGov approached me and was asking specifically about esports, because, there's a huge sports business over here. I said, esports is great and I want to do that, but I want this role to be gaming as well, because I just, thinking about just the massive size of the industry, the number of opportunities, the number of like opportunities that aren't kind of that core shooter or violent kind of, what that esports obviously to a certain extent has, and that a lot of brands just kind of automatically count themselves out of. Like, bigger gaming is such an untapped opportunity. And I think in the next 5 years, it's going to continue to be that. So I said, like, it needs to be an esports and gaming role, and we need one person leading both of those at the same time to make them bigger and grow together. So yeah, now it's, the sector head position that YouGov is cool because it's all about having someone across strategy, right? So we have client service teams and researchers and all of that, but my specific goal is to look at what we offer across the company and its portfolio and make sure that we're creating the right data, the right products to support the gaming industry and to support anyone who wants data in the gaming industry. So I get to be a lot more strategic, a lot less kind of day-to-day tactical, but really thinking about, how do we form partnerships? How do we create new data streams? All that good stuff. So it's, I like that kind of like taking a step back and thinking of how, if we can start from scratch, which I essentially get to do here, like, how do we make something that's really going to benefit the industry and be value add?
Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Specifically like building it from scratch. And I like that you put gaming and esports kind of, in one bucket, so to say, because, you often see these images where like esports is the kind of tip of the gaming iceberg. And if you look at the pyramid, right, it's a super competitive segment, but like gaming is massive.
Yes.
And I recently had an interview where, someone said, oh yeah, it's going to be the first like $1 trillion entertainment industry, like at one point, like not tomorrow, but it's definitely going to accelerate and it's going to overtake everything.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, the like global paper we just put out, almost every country, you're up to like 70% of adults 18 plus gaming in some way, shape or form. Like that's a crazy percent. I can't think of, other than like watching just some random programming on TV, like I can't think of anything else that's that far reaching across that many different demographics, which is a very different kind of view than esports, which is in its own right very valuable, but a very narrow demographic, a very kind of like targeted. So it's cool to see each of those on their own, both doing really well and having value to marketers.
And I heard a person say once that, gaming is so successful because it's more like lean in entertainment versus lean back entertainment. So you get to drive the story. Like, and I mean, you're doing this for so many years. What do you think makes it so successful?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Like the more hands-on, the kind of creating something. So whether you are a competitive person and you get that kind of like I'm gonna win aspect out of things, or whether you're a person who likes to see like that you've spent your time doing something and building something and have something to show for it, like gaming kind of has multiple angles that can connect to either of those. I actually think the reason it's become so successful and so broad reaching in the last several years, obviously accessibility just with mobile. I mean, it's almost everyone in the world has a gaming device at their fingertips now, right? With mobile phones. So I think just kind of that like, just the level playing field that mobile technology has brought is just been huge to growing the industry, especially in the Eastern world. But I also think the social aspect of gaming is something that, like, especially when you look at younger generations and how much time they're spending on, watching live gaming content and, just hanging out within gaming environments like a Fortnite or Among Us or something like that. Like it's the ability to connect with people, whether it's people and you're just doing it virtually, or people that you don't know, but you form a community. Like, I think that's really continued to help gaming grow and for it to reach so many people. We're social people by nature. So an outlet to do that's convenient, like slam dunk.
It's funny. I just remember my mom like not understanding that you can't pause online games, right? And when you're going, I don't know, you play World of Warcraft, you're playing with like 30 other people, 39 actually, right? It's like, I can't leave right now. Yeah, I know it's going on for forever already, but I can't just leave. So it's so I totally get the social aspect. When you look at your field right now, where do you draw the line, like what a gamer is? Because often you talk to people like, hey, you're a gamer. Oh no, I'm not, because you feel like you get the stigma of being a gamer.
Yeah.
But then you look at people's like mobile phones and they all have like, I don't know, even a Candy Crush or something on there. Like, do you look at that as well? Like, where do you draw your lines?
Yeah, I mean, it's very different kind of cohorts of gaming, but I consider any and everyone that's, you know, consuming or playing that type of content, a gamer. So yeah, I mean, to me, my mother-in-law who plays Candy Crush every day, like, to me, she's as much of a gamer as, you know, someone who's logging, you know, 40 hours a week at World of Warcraft or something, right? It's a different form of gaming, you know, gameplay and consumption, but it's still kind of that inherent, like, it's a form of entertainment that, to your point, is interactive. And I think, you know, what is needed to kind of make sure that all of those different segments are thought of as gamers is like more data to understand each of them, right? So yes, they're all gamers, but you could never like run a campaign if you're a marketer or create a game that's gonna like hit every gamer and be satisfying to them, right? So it's more about like, yeah, everyone's a gamer in the same way there are, you know, however many billion TV households around the world, but that doesn't mean that, you know, 5 TV programs are going to capture everybody. So it's more about kind of like understanding what motivates people, what they like, and what engages them, and then you know, hopefully we grow the gamer base even more because of that.
With all the years you locked into working with gaming, do you actually play games? Like, are you like in your private time, like, are you engaged in gaming as well?
So not so much anymore. I've got a 6, almost 7-year-old and 4-year-old. And so first we like hid the PlayStation from my son, because we were like, oh my gosh, once he finds out we have a PlayStation, like, it's over. And his cousin found it, and like he was like, he looked at us like, there's a gaming system in the house. I'm like, oh yeah. So before kids, I admittedly was not like an esport type gamer. So more on, you know, like FIFA. My husband did a lot of Call of Duty racing games. I like, you know, love the classic like Need for Speed series and all that good stuff. So it was more along those lines. But now our household does play old school Mario Kart on a Wii a lot. That's my son's game of choice. So if he plays outside and, you know, checks all the boxes that mom makes him do before he gets to play, then that's his reward. So he wakes up Saturday mornings asking for that. So yeah, we've kind of devolved there. But I'm trying to figure out now when to get one of the new gaming consoles, because it feels weird to not go out and buy one of those right away. So that's maybe that's on the Christmas list if we can get our hands on them.
So if anyone watching this or listening to this and is probably not, you know, deeply engaged in gaming or doesn't really understand the space yet, what do people have to know? Like, what do you think is the most important thing to know about gaming? You mentioned social, you know, the social aspect with it, but so what are the components that people need to understand when they look at gaming and esports?
That's a good question. I mean, gaming versus esports, I would say, are kind of completely different in terms of what people need to understand, right? So the first thing that I try to do is kind of help delineate people to help them understand like how people can interact with gaming content. And to me, there's kind of like 3 main ways that people can do that. They can play competitively and professionally, which to your point is that like tip of the iceberg, right? So a very, very small group of people that are actually participating in it on their own. They can watch gaming content, which to me, I consider as part of the gaming industry. I'm sure the streaming content industry considers that part of them, but to me, it's all about like, what is the subject of the content that people are consuming. So there's, you know, that whole, so whether it's, you know, watching streamers on Twitch or watching esport competitions, but it's kind of like gaming as a form of visual entertainment, not interactive entertainment. And then there's broader gaming, which is you personally are playing, not because you're a professional, but just because you're, you know, you like to game, playing either on your own or with a group. So that's like, I feel like those of us that work in the industry sometimes take for granted that those are, you know, that we kind of know how those 3 different cohorts interact with each other and what they look like. But that's the first thing I start with in talking to people. And they say like, hey, I want to talk about esports. I'm like, all right, what do you think esports is? So let's make sure that we're on the same page, right? And then, you know, on the flip side, if you're a brand saying, hey, I want to get into gaming, like, all right, let's make sure we're looking at all those different aspects, because they're very different in terms of, you know, how you would interact with an audience or who the audience is that's even engaging with them.
So are you a pure data provider, or do you help brands, you know, actually like plan, well, at least, you know, the rough activations, or help them understand what the angles are? So where does your work stop really?
Yeah, that's a good question. Historically, YouGov has been more focused on just kind of the providing data to help plan and to help track and measure performance, and less on kind of like the consulting element of things. But one of the things that we're starting to do with this new sector head role, because again, sector heads, it's not like we're managing clients day to day, is to bring in a bit more of kind of that consultative view on things, and helping our existing clients who have who are subscribing to and ingesting the data we have around like profiling consumers and understanding audiences, and then tracking the performance of brands among consumers all over the world. Like there's obviously a ton of like great nuggets of data in there that someone who knows the industry and the data can pull out, in many cases more than maybe someone of the client. So we are starting to kind of layer a bit more of that kind of consultative element, or at least offer on to clients, because I think that's important. It's one thing that I've consistently seen with esports is it's not always an esports expert that on the brand side gets put into a role to kind of carry all of that out, right? And then sometimes an agency's involved, and sometimes the agency has experience or doesn't. So it's so all over the board that, to me, if there are opportunities to be able to add some consult on top, like that's what our clients need, and ultimately that's also what the industry needs to make sure the activations are being done in a smart way.
Yeah, I like what you said before, because if you speak to, 15 different people, you ask them what esports is, what gaming is, where they draw the line, what the segments and cohorts are, you get 15 different answers.
Yeah.
So a lot of people look at things very, very differently. So I totally like this. Let's get on one page, and then let's start from there. And the one question we always get asked is, you look at these big activations, you see Riot Games doing this crazy stuff with Louis Vuitton, you have these, in-game skins, like all the big things. But that's really expensive by now. So the one question we always get is, what is an angle? How can I start? And how can I probably start on a, let's say, smaller budget? Let's not talk about Riot money, but let's talk about any other angles. Like, do you have any recommendation? Is there any opinion you have on this? Like, how do people actually engage with it if they don't want to go all in? They just want to test, observe.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I actually think a lot of what has happened since COVID has created a ton more opportunities than we've seen. There have been so many organizations within esports that have moved to kind of becoming online tournament providers and competition creators, just because that, number one, there was demand for it, and number two, some of their old business models just during this time weren't working, so they had to innovate, and luckily there's a lot of innovative people in esports, so it works out well. But there are now like so many tournaments, whether it's amateur or semi-pro, where there's event coordinators that are doing a great job putting on and creating fantastic content, but it's not the world champions of the biggest game in the world like League of Legends, right? So it becomes more affordable. I think the caution there that I will often give to brands, I think those opportunities are great, and a lot of those kind of smaller rights holders have avid audiences who you can engage with, but what I try to warn people against is just doing like a one and done, because to me, so much of, you well know as well as I that the word authentic is just thrown around like crazy around here in this industry, but to me it's more about like having a conversation, and that's really hard to have a conversation with fans and like resonate with them and get your point across and your reason for being across if you sponsor one tournament on one day for 2 hours and then disappear. So that's, I think, where kind of sometimes those small things can go wrong because you don't get the best of the fans, and also the brand doesn't really see what esports is. It's just more of like it's basically like a glorified advertisement. So I think looking at, if you've got a smaller budget, looking at something that's less expensive and maybe smaller scale from a viewership perspective, but still has a season to it or has an ongoing series or something like that, is a great way to jump in, because then you're getting kind of like the essence of what it's like to talk to fans, without paying nearly traditional sport prices in some cases for some of the biggest properties in the world.
And that's interesting. So because if you look at sports, look at the big leagues like the NFL, the NBA, all that. Like esports, not there yet. And I know that there's a couple of leagues that, try to become this and build it after that model, and that works more or less. Like I'm not going to judge this now.
Sure.
But like the esports audience to me always appears to be extremely vocal. Specifically, if you look at Twitter, you look at Instagram, like you look at, the comments, like they know they're being advertised to. If they don't like your advertisement, they will let you know. And I'm sure they let you know in sports too. But do you feel that brands are sometimes afraid to go into a dialogue with the audience because it's just different from what they know, and they probably don't know how to deal with, I don't know, this massive backlash they might get on certain things?
Yes, definitely. I think that that has all improved over time because there are more and more big, successful brands getting in and doing a good job, and especially non-endemics, right? Showing that they can have a voice and a place in the space, like a MasterCard or something that may not feel intuitive, but they've created a reason for being and existing alongside esports, and it's worked really well. So I do think it's gotten better, but yeah, absolutely, there are brands that are just scared off either by the kind of not knowing how to talk to people, talk to the audience standpoint, or just the complexity that is esports in general, and not understanding. It's kind of that combination, right, of like, okay, I really don't even understand what I'm getting into, and then everyone tells me I've got to be careful, like too many traps there, I'm gonna avoid it. So yeah, I definitely see that. I think especially on the kind of, talking authentically to the audience perspective, this is where I push back on the industry a little bit, frankly, and say like, hey, like that's one thing that every rights holder, every team like does know how to do, is to talk to their fan base and their audience. And so for any clients that I've consulted in the past on that side of things, it's like, you've got to go out there and, you've got to lean in and have ideas for content creation, have ideas for the storyline between, why that brand belongs there, and show them that like you're gonna go the extra mile to do it, because then once you get that brand in and you can start to kind of partner, like it's gonna get easier. But you have to be the one that helps the brand put the best foot forward with your audience. And I think for some esports organizations, especially teams that are, running lean and mean in many cases, like that's a little bit scary and it's a big undertaking. But in my opinion, that's where things have worked the best, is when the rights holder or team is really kind of helping the brand to drive the conversation, and the brand is confident and comfortable enough to like let the reins go and say, I trust you, which is also hard sometimes, right?
Well, I can imagine it's not that easy, specifically if you're like a, let's say, bigger non-endemic brand,
Right.
because you have a certain image, and it's
Exactly.
super hard to just be like, okay, you go and do it, and we're gonna trust you and support you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So, what are some of the trends you're seeing right now? And I mean, you've probably seen a lot of trends already. And you mentioned mobile gaming, came like almost out of nowhere, and now it's a massive thing. What else do you see right now happening to the industry? Like, are any specific movements you're observing more closely?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that I've had my eye on, and I haven't decided yet if COVID is, I feel like COVID is maybe slowing it a bit, but I think it's just going to be massive, and admittedly, it's a bit more kind of stateside focus, is collegiate. I just think there's such an opportunity and a demand there, both from the kind of player and audience perspective, from the universities who are super like anxious and eager to find a way to bring esports into the fold, and to brands, especially like, one of the things that's always hard about esports is finding a way to get like a regional brand, or kind of like location driven brand, into esports without them feeling like they're wasting money on reaching a bunch of people that would never be in the market for their product. So I think there's also, like, from a financial viability perspective, huge opportunity in collegiate, because you can get more locally focused and bring brands into the conversation that never would have considered esports otherwise. So I'm super, super bullish on collegiate, and I'm excited to see, I mean, the NCAA has been pretty clear in saying like they don't really want to kind of get involved yet, but to me that's exciting, because that means some of these rights holders and publishers like Riot, who's already stepped in, they're going to start coming up with some really like cool creative models, and I'm excited just to see a bit of trial and error in that industry. But I just think like that's the next huge opportunity, and then I'm sure amateur will follow after that. But yeah, that's one that I've got my eyes on for sure.
So, I mean, I asked you a couple of questions, and like, what do you want to talk about? Is there anything else that you want people to know? Is there anything else that you want people to know where you feel like, that's something I really want to put out, like people need to consider this? And I mean, we talked a little bit about what you think people need to know about esports, but is there anything that we haven't touched on yet where you feel like, I definitely need to say this, like people need to be aware of this?
I don't know about that, but I was trying to think ahead of time of what you'd ask me. And I expected at some point a question around kind of like hot titles or what's happening with some of the, leagues coming up and
I still have this. I still have this. If you want to talk about this, I do have this on my list. I didn't want to put you on the spot too much.
No, you're fine.
But but then let's like turn this a little bit. Like, how do you look at titles? Like, how do you measure titles, and what makes a title successful in your eyes?
Yeah, it's in esports. It's I feel like difficult sometimes, because if you look at and you know very well that I've been very passionate about audience measurement and like the right metrics, and kind of making sure that the people are using that to lead the conversation about games and that sort of thing. But I actually don't think the audience is the only thing. I think you have to talk about your audience in the right way, but it's not the only thing that matters. I think more and more it's as much about like the ongoing engagement. And I go back to this kind of like conversation, right, with fans. And to me, like, you could get really great viewership for one event a year, but if all your, if all the kind of lead up or, regular play is barely getting engagement from fans, if fans aren't looking to consume content in between match days and things like that, then to me, like, I'm starting to look at success measurement more and more in that way as well. Is like how must see and must read and must watch is anything and everything that has to do with a particular esports property, whether it's a league or a team or a title, where like the fans just can't get enough of it, right? And that to me is kind of like shows ongoing potential for things. So I mean, when I look at something like that, I think like I'm super excited to see what happens with Call of Duty League coming up. I think there's a lot of buzz about it, but there's also the new Cold War game coming out, which is going to be super exciting. I think it's and then with the new consoles, like I think there's going to be a lot of just like fans being super excited about all things Call of Duty that I think could really lead into some cool momentum. I mean, they've already had momentum here towards the end of the season, but for the league coming up, and then you add in the 100 Thieves are back in it, which is a cool storyline where you get into kind of like, okay, what in traditional sport, what makes someone tune in and excited to come in and see what's going to happen? Like, storyline is a big part of it, right? So you're going to have that. So yeah, like I think that's something really exciting to watch for. I think so much of that comes to that kind of like engagement factor.
So how do you measure this engagement? Is that like conversation on Twitter? Is that conversations on Reddit? Like, what are the platforms? How do people do that? How do people do what you just explained?
Yeah, it's hard. It's super hard. It's, there's so many different platforms that conversation is happening on, and it's nearly impossible to like deduplicate that. I've always said, afraid if I've told you this before, but like my perfect esports metric to figure out like the success of a particular title or property or team would be the average number of touch points per fan per week that each fan has. So if you've got a fan that is engaging with their favorite team that plays in a league, plus the content, plus the match, and they're doing it on like 6 different platforms, like that engagement point could be like 50 engagements per week. Like that's what I think would be the right and best measurement. The problem is like getting that at an individual deduplicate level. It's so impossible to do. I mean, it's also like the reason there's so much success and it's such a fun area to be in is because people are having these conversations in so many places. But the flip side is, from a measurement perspective, it's just horrible to try to figure that out, right? But like, to me, it's figuring that out. So like when I look at like, sure, you know, volumes on social media is useful. I can't stand when people add up all their social media followers like across everything. I'm like, they're all the same. Like you can't do that. It's but whatever.
Happens all the time. Like, and
Yes.
I'm sorry to say this, but you look at some like team pitches and it's all like, we got X million followers. Like, yeah, but if you dedupe them, you know, it's
Right.
probably a lot less. Because it's
Yes,
the same people
exactly.
following you on multiple platforms. So I totally
Right.
get that. And I think it's horrible, but people like big numbers, right? So you
Right.
want big
Yeah.
numbers.
The problem is when everyone just throws out big numbers, then like the big numbers don't impress anymore. I remember talking to one brand and they said, if I get one more team pitch that says that their team has the best social following in esports in the world, I'm gonna like just get out of this industry altogether, because there's no like standard way to do it. So everyone's just saying it's them and like making up their own way of calculating it. But anyways, that's beside the point. I'm trying to even think. I feel like I had one more point to make on that, but I don't know. I got caught.
Yeah,
up
I didn't want to kill your thought process.
No,
But you just said, and I think that's horrible. And I think that if you look at, so the main challenge I see with this is that the real numbers then don't impress anyone. Like the big numbers don't do that anymore, but then you have someone who says, this is what we have. And people are like, yeah, but that's like, we don't even look at this. Right. And I mean, you see a lot of like viewership inflation where, you know, autoplay streams somewhere embedded, or it's the same with videos, right? You go to a website, video starts, you hit the stop button because you're annoyed by this, but then they still count it as a view and be like, oh, we got so many views on our stuff. Like, no, actually you don't. You just autoplay this and people stop it because they don't care.
Right.
You know, and then it becomes even annoying.
Right. And that's where it comes down to, you know, a lot of what I was really pushing. I mean, the whole like average minute audience thing, which is not necessarily the way to measure like VOD content, but for live viewership, at least like that takes that into account, right? If you've got, you know, 1 million people who are watching 0.5 seconds of something, like that's going to show through when you're doing a calculation like that. But I remember the other thing I was going to say quickly on the social piece is I like to look at the percent of followers who are engaging on with an average post, right? Because to me, that gives a bit more of like, yeah, it could be really cool to, you know, be following on Twitter or Instagram or whatever a team, but if no one's ever actually like, you know, giving feedback or engaging, then it doesn't really matter. That's not valuable to a brand. That's not necessarily, you know, valuable to you as a rights holder. So a lot of the analysis that I've done for like teams in particular in the past focuses on that. And it also like that helps to actually uncover what you can do. Cause that's the other thing. If you just got like, oh, 12 million people viewed this, it's like, okay, great. Like what can I do out of that? But if you could say, oh, you know, we have this many followers, but only 8% engaged with this brand sponsored post. And if you compare that to competitors, it's more like 25, like, well, that's a big deal. That's something that, you know, you need to like, you know, figure out and solve for. So it's more of like, not just metrics because you feel like you have to measure, but metrics that will actually help to improve you moving forward.
And I'm shamelessly going to plug something into this right now because like I just today, you know, published something myself where it's about that. And what I think is really annoying is that a lot of brands don't speak the language of their audience. So you have a brand that does a great job, you know, they can be hardware providers. They do, you know, they provide great pieces of hardware. They support the industry. But then when you see that they're working with a team or they're working with a player, it's always this weird voice like, oh, look at this RAM. This RAM is amazing. And I'm going to build this into my computer and it's going to help me play better. It's like, why? You know, just say that you're using this, or, you know, just plug it somehow, but don't start talking weird. And people immediately realize like, oh, wow. So that's not how Nicole typically speaks. Like, that's like, whatever. I'm just gonna ignore this. It's good that she does it because she earns money, but, you know, let's ignore this because who cares? And I just feel like I just feel this is one of the things, and I see this more often now, specifically also on Instagram. Like you see some of these posts and you feel like that's horrible. Like I'm not gonna buy into this at all.
Right. Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I feel like Instagram, especially, there's been many like things that are outed where it's basically like it literally a post has been written for someone and they're being paid to just like copy paste it right on their own feed. So yeah. And I mean, to the point we were talking about earlier, like that's the stuff that like it's not going to make fans like revolt and never watch a particular, team's content or not follow them anymore or stop watching a league, but sure as heck not going to drive purchase, which that's what a brand wants ultimately, right? So that is, that's also why it becomes more and more important to, continue to measure impressions and logo counting and things like that. But also like we need to better understand what that's actually doing in terms of consumer purchase. Because that's the ultimate goal for a brand. And even if you feel like the price that you're getting for the number of impressions is great, like if in a year or two you're not seeing any impact on your bottom line, then it wasn't great at all, right? And I think that's certainly one of the things that, not that you led me right into kind of a pitch of what we're doing, but certainly that's one of the things that I'm working on doing here at YouGov, is enabling more always on measurement across a lot more metrics, so that we can see, so that if you're a brand, you can see exactly how something's working, what levers it's pulling within esports, and you can figure that out after a big weekend, after a big activation, in downtime when there's nothing going on, to see how much ground you lose in the off season that you have to ramp back up. All the above, to just be a lot more diagnostic about like, okay, let's not commit to a 2-year deal and then at the end of 2 years cross our fingers that we saw something. Like, let's really make sure that we're optimizing it and putting, making the most of that 2 million along the way.
I like that. So if you watched the show before, you know what the last question is going to be. Here we are.
Yeah.
If you haven't, it's a big surprise. More off topic. So can you give me one piece of advice that you've gotten? It can be in private life, can be in business, that you would want to give to people. Like, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Let's see. So one of my mentors back at Nielsen gave me a piece of advice that I feel like has stuck with me, because I've been lucky enough to be at the beginning of a lot of businesses, right? Helped to start our games business, helped to start our esports business, came over to YouGov and helped to start this. And, he always told me, like, people are going to give you a number that you need to reach. And, when you're starting out, that number is never going to be right. People are going to have an expectation. It's never going to be the right expectation. And even if it is, at the end, if you blow it away, people are going to say it was too low. And if you don't hit it, people are going to say it was too, like, they're basically like, success, if you measure your success through other people's eyes, it's always a moving target that can often like work against you. So it's his recommendation to me as like, as you continue to start new businesses, like, you're entrepreneurial, and like, you just need to believe in the fact that you're going to work your tail off, and that you're going to make whatever it is that you're making the best, and like, don't worry about the results. If you put it in, you'll get, you'll get out exactly what was meant to, and you'll be successful. So for me, that, I've been lucky to have a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities, but I don't necessarily think of myself as a risk taker. So for me, that always kind of runs in the back of my mind, is like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to constantly be measuring yourself. You just have to like do your best, do great work and keep going. So I like that one.
It worked out, obviously. Like,
yeah, so far so good. Yeah,
it's a good piece. Well, so now's the time for you to plug all your pluggables. Like, what do you have? Where can I get it? How can people get in touch with you? Anything you want to share? Anything you want people to do?
Cool. Yeah. So we just put out a white paper on esports and gaming, the first white paper that YouGov's ever had. I actually just got an email earlier today that it's the most successful white paper released by YouGov of all time. So obviously esports.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. It's it's a total validation of why we're in the space, and I'm glad that so many people, marketers, whoever, academics, anybody and everybody that I've seen download it is just excited to learn more about the industry and what the opportunity is and who all these gamers we've been talking about today are. So that's out at if you go to yougov.com and look, I think it's in like the insights area. There's the ability to download it. It's like 50 pages of free content. So why not, right? Yeah.
Free is always good. Like, free information is always good.
Exactly.
And I've already seen it, and I like it.
Thanks.
What can I say?
Appreciate it. There you go. Vote of confidence. So yeah, we've got that going. We'll have a webinar going. I'm on LinkedIn. So Nicole Pike, look for me on LinkedIn. I'm always trying to post like some interesting data and tidbits of what we're doing at YouGov, and trying to kind of use the advantage we have of having kind of like always on real-time data to just put out numbers about things that are interesting and relevant to people, and hoping to do a lot more of that coming up. And then the last thing that I'll kind of quick plug that's coming up is we have a cool paper coming out on toxicity and discrimination in esports and gaming with a major esports team that we've done in collaboration with them. So I'm not going to totally spill the beans here because I haven't gotten approval, but that should be in the next few months. And I'm super excited to just, I mean, data for good. Like we all need to be doing that more. And I'm in a position to be able to, you know, own and release that data. And very lucky to have a team that partnered with us who cares a lot about that as well. So I'm super excited to just kind of see the reception coming out for that. So yeah.
So when that comes out, are you going to come back and we talk about it?
Let's do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Really,
and I'll have a friend from one of the teams on as well. Well, I mean, that's what your post, it was like funny timing, right? When you had that, because we're literally like in the midst of digging through all this data. Yep. And I was like, well, this is very, very apropos. So yeah, would love to. There's some really interesting findings that we're seeing around, like, especially what people, like how people are responding in terms of altering their own gaming behavior, their aspirations to be a gamer, to be, you know, a professional in the gaming industry based on what they're experiencing in many cases at pretty young ages. So it's going to be really cool.
Well, it's a great time to be alive. Like, I mean, I'm not in gaming that long if you look at my whole career, but the thing is, I never considered it to be a career path. You know, so I followed gaming, sure. I played games, like I did the things you can do, but I never really considered it to be an industry where you can actually go in, you know, make money, build cool stuff, because it was always like more these, for me, it was more like this leisure activity.
Right. Exactly.
And now all of a sudden you see all these jobs popping up, and, you know, people are like, so what can I do? Like, you can literally do anything. Like, you can be an accountant, like you can do anything. Right. Yeah, people basically need everything. So, you know,
it's its own ecosystem
just go and do it.
Yeah, and I think it really benefits from kind of the mix of people who have grown up with gaming their entire lives and people who haven't and have like an outsider's role and perspective to play in the industry. So I feel like it's, you know, very equal opportunity in that sense as well.
Cool. And I know time's never enough. Like, we could go on forever, I feel, but I really appreciate you coming on. And like when you have that other data out, like, let me know. Yeah. And let's definitely talk about this, because I think this is something that people don't talk a lot about. And there's not so much data really on it, right? So I feel it's super hard to get solid data on these kind of topics. So yeah, you're on. That's it.
Awesome. Book it.
Well, yeah. What can you do? Like, you can't do anything. Cool. Well,
great.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yes, this was super fun. Thank you.
Have a great day.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.